Senator, my name is Rusty Roberts. I'm director of the First National Bank here in Manchester. We're a small community bank. And let me say before I go any further, thanks for coming to our neck of the woods. We really appreciate you being here. The question I have has to do with overregulation in the banking industry. We're finding the additional regulations that are placed on us as a bank, a small community bank, prohibits us from making loans to individuals and small businesses that we normally could make. And we have Dodd-Frank just around the corner that's going to impose more restrictions and regulations. And what we're seeing is, even the Office of the Comptroller is clear that we're seeing a consolidation of larger banks and an increasing concentration of the mega banks. So I know you're a co-sponsor of the repeal of Dodd-Frank Act, so I know where you stand on that. But my question is there any real progress or any real movement in Washington to alleviate some of the problems that we see as small communities?
Well, there definitely is a movement on our side, to repeal Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank was a little bit like Obamacare. It started out, the bill's, 1,500 pages to 1,000 pages long. The regulations are already 8,000 pages long. I don't think they're done writing the rules yet. And we don't really write the rules. Some bureaucrats writing the rules. The Congress wrote the law, which was a skeleton or kind of an outline of what the law will become, but it's all being written by unelected people. I'm very concerned about it. And when you look at regulations in Washington, they seem to affect the smaller entities more than the bigger entities. Because, for example, Chase Manhattan may have 5,000 compliance officers. They can unify it and do it for all of their banks, and they'll have somebody in New York doing it. You have to hire one person here in your local bank to do it, and then another one, and then another one. But people need to realize that these regulations, they were intended to avert the crisis that happened in 2008. But the crisis wasn't in your local bank. No banks failed in Kentucky. Not one bank failed in Kentucky. The problem was on Wall Street, but primarily the problem came from government banks. The Federal Reserve, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, who set the interest rates so low that everybody said, oh, I can get a house. And then they said, well, everybody should have a house whether you have a down payment or not. And so we encouraged this through government policy. But the other thing we did is, normally there's a feedback mechanism. The reason in capitalism things do this is because they self-correct. So if you have 10 home builders in Clay County building houses, and then you have 20, and then you have 30, you get all of these houses being built, there's more demand for the money, so the interest rate should rise. As the interest rate rises, you slow down the building because it's more expensive to borrow money. But if you keep the interest rates close to zero, nobody gets the feedback mechanism to tell them we're overbuilt until it gets too late. And then all of a sudden there's a precipitous decline, and that's what happened with our housing market. And then the response is we need new regulations. We have to do something, but when we have to do something, they once again have small brains and big hearts, and they do the wrong thing, and then they hurt the local bank, which wasn't the problem to begin with. That's sort of where we are. And all I can say is that we're trying to repeal Dodd-Frank, but once again we don't have the votes. And I do worry about more and more consolidation, because one of the problems in 2008 is we worried that banks were too big to fail and that we get stuck bailing them out if they fail. But now they've gotten bigger. And so I am in favor of trying to do something about too big to fail. It's a complicated problem, though, and I don't want to do the wrong thing. So we are studying whether or not there is a solution to too big to fail, but we don't want to make the solution such that it makes the problem worse. But I am looking at that. We're also looking at regulations. If we try to fix too big to fail by having some new capital requirements in banks, I want to be able to take off regulations at the same time. So you're doing one thing that may make it harder on banks, but you take away enough regulations to make banks' ability to make a profit much easier. And so maybe the two balanced together might help the banking system.
You mentioned Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The president, I'm sure you know this week, said he would like to phase those out. What do you feel is best?
It was that 80% of loans, no, it was 50% of loans. Now it's what, 80 or 90% of home loans are going through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And having them all concentrated in a government-supported enterprise is not a good idea. How we unwind them is the other question. How we unwind them and make it, ideally they wouldn't exist really. It would all be done through a private secondary mortgage market. But that's dramatically different than what we have. So I think that's the answer, but I don't know the answers of how we get there and whether it's done gradually. One of the things you could do, since these are guaranteed by the taxpayer, I think it's ridiculous to be guaranteeing a $760,000 house. You know, so I mean, really, if we think we need a backstop for certain people, one way to gradually unwind the loans would be to keep changing the number lower and lower. So I think it's crazy. Why would a taxpayer, if you can afford a $750,000 house, I'm all for you. But it shouldn't be guaranteed by the taxpayer. You've got a lot of money if you can get a $750,000 house. So next year make it 500. The next year make it 400, then 300, and then gradually when people have more expensive homes, we'll have to have that's the private market, and it'll build up because those are usually, sometimes are very good loans to have, you know, because the people can make the payments. But how we unwind, it's the real question.